Hello, Jacksonites, and welcome to episode fucking 50 of Super Kaiju Binge. I have been doing this for almost 3 years now, and I'm only 50 episodes in. Seriously, what the hell have I been doing with my life? I should have been done with this by now. The fuck? But not a major monumental movie to be reviewed for the 50th episode, but based on how wildly the two hosts' opinions vary on the film at hand, this should be a fun one to discuss. Today, me and good old Seanie Boy from JTISREBORN will be discussing the very long-awaited sequel to a very, at least in its fandom, very beloved film, 2018's Pacific Rim Uprising. Let's jump right into our personal history. So go ahead, Sean. And try not to just say fuck this movie for an hour and a half, please.
It broke my heart, man. It broke my fucking heart. That's what this movie did. Oh man, Nick, you gotta understand. Pacific Rim is one of my favorite movies of the last decade. It's one of my all-time favorites. That's a movie that just I loved from start to finish. I was disappointed that it didn't do as well stateside, but I was so happy it did well enough. I'm like, yes, we're getting a sequel. Del Toro's coming back. He announced it. Yes, we're getting manga. We're getting everything Pacific Rim. I was a happy child, happy camper. But then, like a lot of Guillermo del Toro movies, like he somehow, I don't know if it's creative differences or whatnot, he ends up not directing like follow-ups or whatever. I mean, he was supposed to direct The Hobbit. That didn't go wrong. The man is has 100 things going on at once, but for whatever reason, the movie went from Warner Brothers to Universal and Legendary Switch Studios or whatever, and Del Toro didn't come back to direct this one, and it definitely shows. So yes. I go in the theater. I'm excited to see this thing. I knew there was some red flags immediately when I saw some of the marketing for this movie. Like the first trailer comes out and they're playing some really shitty hip hop music in it, and then you had this music video that came out called Let's Drift. And it's the most awful, cringy thing I'd ever seen. You know what it is? Pacific Rim Uprising is Poochie. You ever see The Simpsons, the character Itchy Scratchy, and then they had the dog Poochie, which was basically what happened was, and that's Pacific Rim Uprising. It's Poochie. Poochie's the most awful, tries to be hip, cool character, but everybody just fucking hates it. That's Pacific Rim Uprising. So, I guess if you've seen The Simpsons, right, Nick? You a little bit,
maybe 25 episodes over its entire run.
Okay, well, that's still enough. Well, anyway, you're aware of Itchy and Scratchy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's one. Well, so in one of the episodes, they made a whole episode about being forced to add in cool characters. You know how sometimes people try to add things in to be hip and cool, and it's very obvious and really painful.
I can't think of any specific example off the top of my head, but yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Okay, well, it's the higher up executives thinking they can do things to let's add this, we'll make it hip and cool. And
speaking of Universal, the 2011 Thing movie with the studio executives just saying, and replace all the practicals with CGI. That's what everybody likes nowadays, right?
Right, and yeah, some stupid stuff like that. But anyways, in the episode, you have Itchy and Scratchy. And then Homer voices this new character named Poochie, and it's the Krusty the Clown or whatever. He's like, hey kids, and their new friend Poochie. And Poochie is the most obnoxious character possible. He's this hip hop rapping extreme, trying to be really cool character, and everybody fucking hates him. And then they just, instead of killing him off, they ADR over his voice on the cartoon, and they just the animation cells, you could see the hand moving out of the way. It's Poochie died on his way back to his alien planet, and it just boom. But Poochie was meant to poke fun at studios adding in the most obnoxious characters. That's what this movie is. It's fucking Poochie the dog. And with the other first movie, it had heart, it had soul to it. And I really wanted to love this thing. You gotta understand, first Pacific Rim, one of my favorite movies. And then going into this movie and just seeing the downward trend in quality, you could see my heartbreak in it. And I was going through what people did when they saw The Phantom Menace. I wanted to say I like this movie, but in my heart I just knew it wasn't really doing it for me. I knew we were in trouble. Like I said, as soon as the marketing kicked up, we had this awful like music video called like Let's Drift or whatever, done by like Nerdist. I think I sent it to you, Nick, beforehand, and I'm like, oh god, this is so bad. It was like I felt secondhand embarrassment like watching it, and that's what this movie is. It's like the executives like, oh, this will be cool, this will be hip. Let's bring in all these like young cast members. Let's not really bring in some of the like the other actors previous thing. We'll make it young, we'll make it hip, we'll make it cool. Because like that's what we want to do, and it just failed miserably. Like all the gravitas, all the weight of the robots, it doesn't feel there. John Boyega, he's fine. Like he's the only like character I kind of like in the movie. But then you just have everyone else, all 500 characters in it, and it just it feels so empty. I feel like depressed when I started watching this one again. Yeah, there's a few cool bits in that, I suppose, but it lacked the heart, it lacked the soul of like the first movie. And that really sucks, man, because like I love the first movie so much, and I went into this movie and I was even going back watching my old video on it. You could see me, I'm trying to justify liking it, but in my heart it's just not there. And then upon rewatching it, like there's a reason I don't really rewatch this movie again. It'd been a couple of years, and then seeing this one again and just it's just not there. And I wanted it to be good. I probably wanted it to do well so I could get like more Pacific Rim stuff, but seeing like going from the first movie to this, it's just such a downward like leap in quality, and it just makes me sad because I wanted this thing to be so good. I didn't want to hate Pacific Rim Uprising, and do I truly despise it? Like I just because I love the first film so much, this one hurts. That's kind of where I'm coming from with this thing. But I don't know, I'm getting off track. I rewatched it again last night because, Nick is like, come on, Sean, you got to jump on this video. You got to talk Pacific Rim Uprising with me. And I didn't want to do it. And he knows I didn't want to talk about it. But then again, I'm like, all right, no. I'll give this thing another chance. It's been a few years. Maybe I'll like it a bit more. I didn't. In fact, I feel like I may have disliked it more than the last time I saw it. It just felt like lesser and lesser. I just felt empty watching this thing. I felt soulless. I felt like...
Alrighty, let's
Go ahead and cover the goddamn plot. Let's get to the fucking point.
No, we ain't calling on the plot yet. It's my turn. This has to be a yin and yang type review, Sean. You can't just be all yang. Alrighty, so
fuck this movie.
I, of course, was very excited, and while I do agree that the first Pacific Rim, it does work as a standalone movie, I don't like standalone movies anymore. If you have a cool concept, I want more. Don't limit it to just one movie. That being said, every movie that you make, it either has to stand on its own or it can work standing on its own, like the original Star Wars trilogy. We didn't really need the sequel trilogy, but the original Star Wars trilogy shoots all of its bullets. The first Pacific Rim shot all of its bullets. But I did follow a lot of the rumors and rumblings and murmurs that a sequel was either trying to get made or like it entered pre-production or there was still more talks for it to be getting made. But then when it was finally announced that officially there is a Pacific Rim 2 on the way, of course I was excited. The two major red flags for me when it was coming out, the first, because this is post Hellboy 2, when it was announced that Guillermo del Toro was not returning as the director, I was a little disappointed. But the other red flag for me was when I used to be part of a kaiju group called...
A kaiju groupie?
Toho Kingdom, I think was called. Maybe. It was a bunch of angry masturbate corner kaiju groupie assholes who just gatekeep the shit out of everything. But there was one post when this movie was coming out. It was it was during its theatrical run that said that the movie is shorter than the first film. And that to me is always a red flag. I don't like when sequels are shorter than their predecessors.
Unless the movie's like 4 hours long or 3 hours long or something like that.
At least, like, no, not necessarily. I mean, I'd like them to be that long, but like, say the first film is 2 hours long. If the second movie is an hour and 45 minutes long, that is a gargantuan red flag for me. Look at Venom and Venom: Let There Be Carnage.
I actually kind of enjoyed Venom 2 a little bit more, but it is very short. Like that movie.
Still, I went into this movie pretty excited. Of course, I remember really liking the first film, and I got this movie when it first came out on DVD in 2018, and I sat down and I watched it, and I was fairly entertained. Oh, it's Toku Legion. That was the name of the. Okay, I remember now. Yep. I remember Toku Legion with Vietnam flashbacks.
I'm having Vietnam flashbacks thinking about this movie.
So I liked the movie, but it didn't leave that much of an impression until I started seeing more of the hate. Pacific Rim Uprising has a gargantuan slew of people that just spit bile at this movie. In 2019, when the first stills for Godzilla King of the Monsters were released, like when Godzilla's shooting his atomic breath into the sky, there was one commenter that really got under my skin. He was saying, "Oh, hey, look, Godzilla looks fat. Man, this combined with Pacific Rim 2 being so bad, I think I need to make a petition to have it be remade." Oh god, that really put me off of the Pacific Rim fan base really badly. Yeah, I've seen tons and tons and tons of people just rip this movie apart and say it's one of the worst movies ever made. And I'm here to tell you
it's not. I may not like it that much, but it isn't one of the worst films ever made. It just
no. Have you not seen Jeepers Creepers Reborn?
Nick, I saw that piece of shit in theaters. they green screened the police cars.
No, guys, this is not one of the worst movies ever made. But I'm also here to tell you guys, I like Pacific Rim 2. I'm going to be the devil's advocate. I'm going to pull a Trevor Boy with Alien vs. Predator Requiem, which I now think I more fall into his corner regarding that film. Yeah, I like Pacific Rim 2.
No. I just heard you say positive about Alien vs. Predator Requiem. That is legitimately like my most hated theatrically wide release movie of all time. I don't understand it. Like, you can't see a damn thing. It's so bad.
Moving on.
I don't get it. I just don't.
That being said, so was Pacific Rim 2 worth waiting 5 years?
Nope.
No. Had this movie come out maybe 2 or 3 years after the first film, I don't think people would have been so vicious towards this movie, because I do think that is a big reason why people were so nasty towards this. I defend this film, but I will say you made us wait 5 years just for this. This is the best you can do.
You got rid of Del Toro for this.
Come on, guys. You could do better. But yeah, I do think had this movie come out only a couple years after the first, hell, it could have been released alongside either Jurassic World or
Well, this is the year of Rampage, too. This is 2018. Rampage is a way better movie than this one.
Rampage and The Meg, I think, both stole this movie spotlight, so that doesn't help either. But had this come out in like 2015, and if this was still to be released by Universal, maybe people could have...
Warner Brothers?
No.
You said it was. Well, because if it was still... Well, actually, because they were under... They switched after, 2014 to go to Universal, if I was not mistaken.
That is a question that I do have. Why did they switch over to Universal?
because I don't know, like something with like Warner Brothers had a lot of screw ups. Let's be honest. That studio's been in a messy state. I mean, like even looking at the release of like Dune and Godzilla versus Kong, like they had to pay Legendary a hefty sum of money when the CEO like Jason Kilar was just like, oh, I'm just gonna release all these movies day and day and like HBO Max and that. Like, wait a minute. We're not a part of HBO Max. Like, we need a cut of that money. We're gonna sue the hell out of you if you don't like settle this stuff in court. Because they want to do the day and date release. Yeah, like that stuff happened. But in a way, the day and date release also like gave theaters the confidence kind of going back into theaters or whatever. But it's a weird state we're in. But anyways, yeah, I don't know what the deal was with that. I mean, Legendary did have some success at Universal. Like, I mean, they kind of piggybacked off of Jurassic World because that movie's pretty much
Yeah,
already
that's
like.
what I was gonna say. They
But like
probably
other
had,
than that, like they didn't really like do very well with Universal outside of Jurassic because a lot of the movies they like greenlit didn't do like very well financially. I guess like this is one of the examples of them too. I mean, it's not like the worst box office take, but to only make like 50 million domestic with the movie budget this big, that's yeah.
Alrighty. Pacific. So to wrap up my initial thoughts, I do defend Pacific Rim Uprising. It's not the Pacific Rim 2 that would have been worth waiting 5 years to see, but I do think this movie is woefully and ridiculously overhated. Goddamn ridiculously overhated. So, Pacific Rim Uprising is a 2018 American science fiction monster film directed by Stephen S. DeKnight, who is, I think, most well known
Working on
for,
Daredevil.
for creating the Spartacus TV series for Stars, whom he is now making a sequel to right now. This being his feature film directorial and writing debut, along with being written by DeKnight, Emily Carmichael, Kira Snyder, and T.S. Nolan. It is the sequel to the 2013 film Pacific Rim, and Guillermo del Toro, the director of the first film, serves merely as a producer,
But he never saw the movie, from what I heard.
while production studios Legendary Pictures and Double Dare You Productions developed the movie. The sequel stars John Boyega as well as Scott Eastwood and a whole bunch of
Other
Indian,
people.
Russian, Chinese, and maybe
Charlie
one.
Day and Bern Gorman are the only ones back, and of course Mako, which
Yeah, we'll talk about that later.
we'll get to that horse shit.
The story follows Jake Pentecost, who is given one last chance to live up to his father's legacy after Kaiju, giant sea monsters, are unleashed back into the world and aim to destroy it. Pacific Rim was released March 15th, 2018, or no, March 23rd, excuse me, 2018 by Universal Pictures, unlike its predecessor, which was released by Warner Brothers, with a gross of $290 million worldwide against a
150 to
$150 to $176 million budget. It is considered a major box office disappointment. It received mixed reviews, with many critics considering it inferior to Del Toro's film, criticizing its story while praising its visual effects, action sequences, and performances of Boyega, Eastwood, and
that other girl.
Kaylee Spaney. I think that's how you, or Spiney. It was
Samsonite, I was way off.
It was followed in 2021 by a 14-episode animated series on Netflix, Pacific Rim: The Black, which I still have not seen.
That was actually pretty good. I will give it that. Like it kind of wiped it. It made up for Uprising a bit. So I need to watch it again. But I actually genuinely liked that thing. I was kind of sad when it ended. I was like, oh man, I like this.
Alrighty, Sean, we're gonna go back and forth on the plot, but I'll start.
Yep.
In 2035, 10 years after the Battle of the Breach, in which the portal created by the precursors through which they sent Kaiju was closed, former Jaeger pilot Jake Pentecost, son of Stacker Pentecost,
Idris Elba
makes a living by stealing and selling Jaeger parts on the black market in Santa Monica, California, of course being played by John Boyega of sequel Star Wars fame. After he tracks part of a disabled Jaeger's power core to the secret workshop of 15-year-old Jaeger enthusiast Amara Namani, both are apprehended by the Pan-Pacific Defense Corps, PPDC, following an altercation between Amara's small single-pilot Jaeger Scrapper and the law enforcement Jaeger November Ajax. Why not just call it Ajax?
Because Ajax was taken by that guy in Venom.
Don't you mean Deadpool?
Oh, Deadpool. See what I mean? It's just he's so forgettable anyways. Why did I say Venom? Because we were talking Venom earlier, so I was like,
Jake's adoptive sister and Japanese Senator Mako Mori, returning from the first movie, persuades him to return to PPDC as an instructor to avoid prison with Amara as his recruit.
oh, this is going to be a tough paragraph to read. Arriving at the China Shatterdome, Jake starts training Jaeger cadets with his estranged former co-pilot Nate Lambert. Nate and Mako explain that the Jaeger program is threatened by the Shao Corporation's new drone program, which I don't know why it's so active when there's no kaiju attacking, but it's beyond me, which offers to mass-produce Jaeger drones developed by Lywan Shao and Dr. Newt Geisler. Mako is due to deliver a final assessment to determine the approval of the drones at a PPDC council meeting in Sydney, but is accidentally killed by a rogue Jaeger. 37 minutes into the movie, Mako Mori, that's right, the lead from the previous film, is killed off 37 minutes into the movie.
Yeah, we'll talk about that
We're
later.
going to talk about that horse shit in a minute. By Rogue Jaeger, Obsidian Fury. During an altercation with the later and Gypsy Avenger, Jake and Nate's Jaeger before she can, her death prompts the PPDC Council to authorize and deploy the drones immediately. Obsidian Fury escapes into the ocean before backup Jaegers can apprehend it.
Moments before her death, Mako had transmitted the location of a defunct Jaeger production facility in Siberia. Jake and Nate travel there in Gypsy Avenger, but Obsidian Fury destroys the complex and engages them in battle. Although Obsidian Fury initially has the upper hand, Gypsy Avenger is able to overpower the Jaeger. Upon removing its reactor after a really badass line from John Boyega, "Pilots of Obsidian Fury, get the hell out of your compod!" They find that Obsidian Fury was controlled not by humans, but by a kaiju's secondary brain, which testing shows was grown on Earth, making it essentially a giant cybernetic Jaeger, which is awesome.
When the drones reach their respective locations, their piloting operations are hijacked by clone kaiju brains secretly mounted on board. The kaiju Jaeger hybrids simultaneously attack all Shatterdomes, inflicting heavy casualties and incapacitating almost all Jaegers. Newton, Herman, Gottlieb decide to try to disable the drones, but later discovers that the former is behind the attack when he commands the kaiju Jaeger hybrids to open multiple breaches across the Pacific Rim. Newt's mind has been possessed by the precursors, who forged a link when he and Herman drifted with kaiju brains, and formed all sorts of other bonds with the kaiju, which I just seeing that in the theater, I was like, what the fuck what are we doing? It said he placed the brains in the drones as Obsidian Fury to ensure the precursor's plan would proceed, having orchestrated the assassination of Mako to force the drone plan to go ahead. Now, before we continue, Nick, Charlie Day having Demolition Man brain sex with the kaiju. Think about that. That's in this movie. It genuinely feels like something I would see, like with his character on Always Sunny, but it's just in this movie. It just what? Why are we doing this? We'll get to that in a second. We get to the cons, but holy fuck! Go ahead,
I
Nick. I'm
don't think
sorry.
it's a con, but it is weird.
No, it's a con for me. It's like it's both a what the fuck. Like I find it funny, but it's also so stupid. Oh.
Although Li Wen is able to destroy the drones, closing the breaches, three kaiju, Hakuja, Shrikethorn, and Raijin, two Cat 4s and a Cat 5, had already emerged and reached Tokyo. The team realizes that the precursor's true goal is to detonate Mount Fuji with the kaiju's blood, which will cause every volcano lining the Ring of Fire to erupt, releasing volcanic matter into the atmosphere and wiping out all life on Earth, simultaneously terraforming the planet for precursor colonization.
The cadets are mobilized while Herman and Lai Wen repair the PPDC's 4 salvageable Jaegers. Herman develops Kaiju blood-powered rockets, which launch the team to Tokyo. Although the Jaegers, including Gypsy Avenger, initially repel the 3 Kaiju, Newt merges them into a Mega Kaiju using robotic parasites from one of Lai Wen's factories. 3 of the 4 Jaegers are destroyed, leaving Gypsy Avenger as the only one remaining. Jake and Amara replacing the injured Nate pilot it against the Mega Kaiju, with Lai Wen remote piloting Scrapper and aiding them by locating a rocket and welding it into Gypsy, which sends the Jaeger with Scrapper holding on into the atmosphere and free falling back to Earth, colliding into the Mega Kaiju and killing it at the last second. Jake and Amara survive by transferring to Scrapper. Enraged at the Mega Kaiju's action, Newt attempts to initiate a Plan B, but is knocked out and captured by Nate. Later, Jake speaks with Newt, who warns the Precursors' return. Jake states that humanity is preparing for the upcoming war, and the movie ends Independence Day 2 style with no sequel. That's right. We get another horseshit cliffhanger ending. Think about it. It's the exact same ending as Independence Day Resurgence. Literally, like,
I've never seen it.
Well, I mean, you know, like I said, it's the exact same ending. They're like, instead of this one, you also have the scientist like Brent Spiner, who's somehow still alive. He's like, let's go kick some alien ass and take the fight to them. And I was about to say, I thought Scott Eastwood was in both, but no, it's just Liam Hemsworth. Yeah, it's just my goodness. So how about this plot, Sean? While Nick's away, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Now, I will say this isn't like the worst movie of all time. I just felt like empty rewatching it. But the story this time around, there's a few neat ideas. I'll give it that. But the story is like an incoherent kind of mess. Like it takes about like 40 minutes before the plot really kind of gets going. And I think that's the problem with this one. Whereas the first film was a lot easier to follow. It was very simple. It establishes everything right away. You feel the stakes with it. You feel the tension. You feel all that. This one, it's like, I mean, the kaiju have been gone for 10 years, and there's not really like a big catalyst event to kind of start the movie. Nothing like really like remotely big kind of happens until like 30 to 40 minutes into it, like when that Jaeger first shows up. And you feel kind of like, why am I even here? Like, what's the point of him becoming a Jaeger pilot when all the kaiju are kind of gone? You know what I'm saying there? It just, the reasons don't feel as justifiable, like to have them around, like constantly building stuff when the last movie, they pretty much wiped out the Precursors, right? They nuked the whole area, and that seemingly was kind of it. But here it's like we've had 10 years of peace. Yeah, you can still kind of prepare for things, but it doesn't feel the sense of urgency like the previous film had. And it's not as simple to follow. It's a little bit messier. There's like so many new characters. You have Charlie Day brain fucking a kaiju. Just, I what are we doing here? How do we get to this point?
All right.
I know there's some people I'm sure on the internet that would be really into this, but like you're not supposed to have that in a mainstream movie. It's not. This is appealing to somebody out there. Somebody in there is like, I mean, you've seen some weird sides of fandom, Nick. I'm sure, like in your many years on the internet. Like, I mean, that's got to appeal to a very, very small section of monster movie fans to like go like in that direction. But sweet mercy, like I just it feels like something his character from Always Sunny would do, though, is the thing. But
Alrighty. I do think there are a lot of times when the script of this movie and the like everybody involved is really trying. I get the sense that
four writers on the scene.
Okay. There being 4 writers, it does show. I do think the script is pretty messy. It does kind of have Spider-Man 3 syndrome where it just kind of felt like everybody was trying to throw in as much stuff as they possibly could in order to make this movie as big and bombastic as possible. But in that problem, unfortunately, I think the film kind of spreads its resources a bit too thin.
Exactly.
And a lot of its ideas, while really cool in concept, some of them are fairly flushed out, and a lot of them just feel like, they kind of feel like bullet points for a sequel to explain later almost. Like there's elements here that feel like, okay, we'll introduce it in this movie, but if we get a third film, we'll delve even more so into these. And that's not how you write a script, guys. Again, to quote the great Zack Snyder, you need to shoot all your bullets. But that being
Snyder shot a
said,
few too many in some of his stuff, but that's just me.
I do think that there is a lot of effort that went into this movie. They tried to make this feel like the natural continuation of the first movie. I still feel there's a lot of callbacks to the first movie, mostly just like in dialogue, but at least, they're aware of the first movie. There's a lot of elements that feel, yeah, like natural continuations, like the advancement of technology, the world recovering from kaiju attacks, some parts of the world still not being fully put back together after kaiju attacks. There's a lot more international cooperation, like China with America and Russia and India. Everybody's still just coming together in order to make the world a better place. It does still keep that theme from the first movie of everybody uniting together. So the plot is kind of messy at times, I will agree. It does have some problems, but I do think there was a lot of effort that went into this movie, so I can appreciate it. I don't think this movie feels soulless fully. I don't think it feels hollow fully. And I don't think that this was just a cheap cash in. Not in the slightest. So, how many pros do you have? I have 10.
4.
Go ahead.
All right, but I'll just run through them really quickly, Nick. So pro number 1, I'll say John Boyega. I think he is a good lead in this movie. He's very charismatic. There's some kind of iffy things like with his character in it, but for the most part, he does the best he can with the material he's given. I feel really bad for this guy because he is a really good actor. I mean, but he's just constantly like thrown in so much like crap. Like he's in a movie that like he's obviously like kind of better than like Force Awakens, kind of the same deal. He was better than like what was like on screen there, especially like Last Jedi. But John Boyega is very charismatic. You kind of buy him as like Idris Elba's son, but I feel like having the thing is making him like Stacker's son, but without really seeing him like any scenes with him and Idris Elba. I think this movie would have benefited from at least like one flashback with Idris Elba and him together to kind of buy that. We're just like told, oh, you're his son, you're his son, you're his son, you're his son. But I don't really like that so much in movies sometimes, where we don't see where like a character comes in as the son of a previous character, but we never see them really interact with their parents. It can work in some example, like Top Gun Maverick, but then again, like at Top Gun Maverick, he was still like the dad was still there with the like Rooster or whatever. Like Goose's son was still with him for a very brief time, like with him as a father, but we at least got to see that.
He does look like his dad a lot.
Right. So there's still some ways you can kind of make it work. I feel like we kind of need a little bit more. And again, like they're like, oh, like it feels like retroactively done in a way because there was no reference to his son at all in the previous film.
It probably was.
Right. So, and I could have probably bought this a little bit more if we would have gotten hints of this in the first movie, or at least seen more scenes with him and Mako because they're supposedly siblings. Like I didn't really get that vibe so much. It needed more time with that, but yeah. So Boyega's pretty good in this thing. The other people like kind of like are okay, but like the Jaeger pilots are so forgettable. I don't remember any of their names like whatsoever. I mean, Scott Eastwood's doing okay, and then you have the one young girl, and she's okay too. She's not bad by any stretch of the means, but I don't really remember them. Like even after watching this movie, like I did, like Raleigh or Mako or the Hensons,
whom they name drop only twice.
Right. Like, where is Raleigh in this movie? Like, this movie needed Charlie Hunnam. Like, it really did. It needed him and Boyega. I think would have been stronger, or at least have Mako be the co-lead again.
I hate to say it, I kind of get the vibe he's dead.
They deliberately don't say he's dead though. He is not one of the pilots up there. He's kind of disappeared. So they deliberately didn't like want to mention it because in case Charlie Hunnam wanted to come back. It's kind of like the same again, kind of a similar issue to like Independence Day 2, where Will Smith like said no to the movie because he did Suicide Squad. And like they killed his character off like in between movies, and all you get is this giant Will Smith portrait. Like you could have just wrote around it like he got in like an accident and kind of bring it back for the third act or something. But again, it's kind of one of those things where it's the similar, like there's a lot of similarities between this and Independence Day 2 in a lot of ways. Like as it feels like we're just kind of doing some things again, like it feels kind of forced. Whereas the other one felt more natural the first time it happened. But yeah, so Boyega's still pretty good in it. Pro number 2, I think there's some cool looking Jaeger designs. Like Gypsy Avenger, it like I mean is a nice little upgrade of in some ways like Gypsy Danger. Not quite. I mean, I like the design of it, pretty good. I don't really like the other Jaegers kind of have some cool looking designs. They don't really like stand out in terms of names or anything like that because there's so many of them at this point. I kind of like the fact in the first movie they were kind of limited in terms of Jaegers. It kind of elevated the stakes. Here, there's just so many of them at this point. You have all these endless drones that I don't know. It just feels like when a Jaeger's on screen, it doesn't feel nearly as impactful. It feels kind of throwaway in some ways. But there are some cool looking designs, and I like some of the weapons that they utilize in here. Like there's one that's like kind of a gravity thing where it like picks up cars and that and it kind of whips like a whip or something like that. I thought that was kind of cool. And like you said, Nick, I like some of the ideas of how they've advanced with the
Gravity
technology.
Sling, I think it's called.
Yeah, the gravity thing, like that was kind of cool. And going to the next pro, there is some entertaining action bits in this movie. Now, I don't think they're as impactful as what they were in the first film. And we certainly needed more of them, at least earlier on in the film, because there is nothing for like a good 40 minutes. And you really start to feel it until like Obsidian Fury kind of shows up. And again, the idea of Jaeger versus Jaeger, that's something we didn't really get in the first movie. So I kind of like some of those elements. And I like some of the hybrid element designs. I think that's kind of neat. And then finally, my last pro of this movie is the Mega Kaiju. Now, the three other Kaiju, they don't stand out too much. They all kind of look very similar, the same. They didn't have like really two distinctive looks, I feel like you got in the previous film with like Knifehead or Otachi or Leatherback or anything like that. These monsters, they all kind of have like the same skin tone or whatever, and they kind of look like variations of another. But the Mega Kaiju, like Kaiju kind of forming together like a Megazord, I thought that was pretty cool. And like the sheer size and scope of this one thing, and you have like an army of Jaegers trying to take it out. Like I thought that was actually pretty cool, and it made for some entertaining action bits. So there are a few things I like in it, but that's pretty much all I got. So, and some neat, like I said, there's some kind of neat ideas it has, but a lot of stuff it just executes quite poorly. So there you go, Nick.
Before we begin, a word from our sponsor.
Go ahead. I'm going to take a nap. You go ahead and say your pros, and I'll wait till we get to the cons. Unless I hear something that's bullshit, then I'll jump in.
Oh, you might.
Mm-hmm.
So pay attention. Well, the first pro is probably might be the biggest thing that me and Seanie Boy agree on regarding pros. John Boyega as Jake Pentecost. Yeah, he's awesome in this movie. Honestly, I do think he gives a better performance in this movie than all three of the sequel Star Wars movies combined. Force Awakens does come very close. I do think he's the best character in Force Awakens, aside from Han Solo. But that's neither here nor there. But John Boyega is absolutely acting his ass off in this movie. And Jake Pentecost as a character, I think he's quite likable. At first, you might think otherwise. He's literally just a millennial post-war brat that has a huge chip on his shoulder because his dad was a huge war hero and he doesn't want to follow in that legacy. He doesn't want to live in his father's shadow. But whenever he is back in what he grew up in, it's very obvious that he both does and does not want to carry on his father's legacy. He wants to make his dad proud, but he also doesn't want people to constantly compare him to his father, which is kind of his catchphrase in this movie, I am not my father. But it's ironic because he does act like his dad quite a bit. He's very hands-on. He's very gung-ho. He's very shoot first and ask questions later. Unlike his dad, though, he is willing to stop and listen to other information before just going in guns blazing. So Jake Pentecost is a very good lead. John Boyega does a great job playing him, gives a great performance. He's got some good dialogue. There's some nice callbacks to the first film. He's got good chemistry, like character-wise. He's got good chemistry with the rest of the cast. He does have a pretty believable, it's kind of briefly shown, but I do think he has a believable chemistry with Mako Mori. And you definitely buy his sorrow and sadness when Mako is killed. Again, it's brief, but I believe it. And there's another really nice callback when all the Jaegers are about to be deployed in Tokyo. He says, "I'm not a good speech guy." Yeah, he gives a better feel invincible speech than Pentecost did in the first movie.
No.
Call me
There's no way
crazy.
you can top "Today we are canceling the apocalypse." I don't really remember much about like Boyega's speech after just watching it, but I remember Idris Elba's, which
Moving
ironically
on.
was the Independence Day speech. Oh my God, there's so many why am I thinking so much Independence Day between these two movies each? It literally is the first Independence Day Pacific Rim, and then you have like the second one and the second Pacific Rim. Like it's so similar in some ways, but my goodness. And then like Scott Eastwood is basically like Liam Hemsworth in the other movie, and okay, I'll stop. But
Pro number 2, this is a very minor one, but I like the return. Well, I like the return of Newton as well, but I like the return of Gottlieb. I love how his character has progressed from the first movie. And in the first movie, Gottlieb was all mind and no heart, whereas Newton was all heart and no mind. In this movie, Gottlieb has evolved greatly to combine, using science, numbers, and mind, along with getting your hands dirty and taking kaiju pieces apart. And he's more hands-on with his work, just like Newton was. He's trying his best to combine what he and Newton were in the first movie just into one. His chemistry with the rest of the cast is quite strong. He definitely feels like the same character from the first movie. Duh. And his assistance in the third act feels very genuine and strong. Like he actually wants to help all the Jaegers accomplish their mission and saving the world. I just really like the return of Gottlieb. He's a great character. He's a lot of fun to watch, and yeah, I like him.
yeah, he's pretty. Like, I mean, he's good in this one too, like the first one. So
Pro number 2.
can't say the
Another
best
thing,
about.
he's not quite. No, not at all. Actually, I get that this was the contrast in the first movie, but thankfully Gottlieb here is not obnoxious and unlikable like he was in the first movie. Not stick wedged firmly up his ass sideways like he was in the first movie.
There need to be more with him and Newt, but then again, Newt is like the main human film. Oh man, what do they do with Newt? Oh, sweet juice.
Pro number 3 is Gypsy Avenger / the rest of the Jaegers. Hey, brace yourself, Sean. All of the Jaeger designs, in my opinion, are superior in this movie than the last one. I like Gypsy Avenger. I like Saber Athena. I like the big wrecking ball Jaeger.
I just can't remember any of their names. Is the problem?
Their names are a bit bullshitly stupid. Like I remember Saber Athena only because it's orange and has 2 swords. That's it. The other one I call Wrecking Ball Dude, and the other one I call Laser Whip Dude.
Yeah.
But their designs are all really cool. Their colors are great. Their weapons are great. They don't feel quite as underpowered as they do in the first film.
Mm-hmm.
And especially with Gypsy Avenger, I do prefer Gypsy Avenger over Gypsy Danger. I like the design. It's very familiar. It looks like Gypsy Danger. It's just a slimmed down, streamlined, upgraded version of Gypsy Danger.
And
It
it's
has all
blue.
the same, huh?
And it's blue.
Well, Gypsy Danger is blue too, but
Well, this is a
Gypsy
much
Danger,
more like blue. Gypsy Danger kind of has a bit of like it's not.
almost
It's more.
purple blue.
It's kind of got more of a grayish type blue. Like it did. Like this one feels like more like turquoise blue. Let's take a look.
Cyan. Gypsy Avenger is more cyan blue, a brighter blue, but Gypsy Danger is a much darker blue. But anyway, yeah, Avenger has all the same weapons, but they're faster and much more streamlined, which does make sense, and it goes into the 10-year time jump, which I appreciate. Jaeger technology is much more advanced because,
Yeah, they both have
A, they've had 10 years to throw themselves into this technology and perfect it and streamline it and upgrade it. But also it makes sense because not only have they had 10 years, they've had 10 years of peace to perfect Jaeger technology. And that's one thing I also love about this movie. This could be seen as an added pro. Even though this movie doesn't have the same budget as the first film, it looks a lot more slick, which I really like. There's none of that grungy, thrown together in an afternoon type feel that the first Pacific Rim had, like with the Jaegers and the Shatter Domes. Because they've had 10 years of peace, they can streamline everything and make it look a lot more clean, sterile, and fresh, which I really like. Not to say that the gritty, grungy feel of the first movie was bad, but I do like the contrast. They've had 10 years to perfect their weapons, and I think it's paid off. But yeah, I like Gypsy Avenger, and I like the rest of the Jaegers. Their names are kind of stupid, but I do like all their designs. Wrecking Ball Guy is a giant tank. Laser Whip Dude is just chock full of weapons. Saber Athena is small, but is also very agile and has 2 swords to slice up bitches left and right, which is cool. And of course, Gypsy Avenger is a nice upgrade to Gypsy Danger, whom I prefer. Pro number 4 is Obsidian Fury. Obsidian Fury might be my favorite Jaeger of the entire franchise. I've still yet to see Pacific Rim the Black, so I might have to eat my words, but I love Obsidian Fury, both in concept and just as a giant robot. Concept being, well, the concept of Jaeger versus Jaeger combat in and of itself is cool. Who doesn't like watching giant robots fight each other? But concept 2, as in, it's essentially like a super weaponized version of Gypsy Avenger. Obsidian Fury feels like a really nice, natural opponent for Gypsy Avenger. I also really like Obsidian Fury's weapons. 2 orange energy blades instead of just 1. Shoulder missiles, arm blades, and essentially it's a breast fire style energy weapon, or a unibeam style energy weapon. I love Obsidian Fury. It's a very badass giant robot. It only has 2 scenes, but when it's on screen, it's awesome. Pro number 5 is the 3 Kaiju. Shrikethorn, Raiju, and who's the third one? Hakuja, I think. Right?
The only one I remember is Mega Kaiju.
Hakuja, I was right. Hakuja, Shrikethorn, and
Hakuna
Raiju.
Matata.
I prefer these 3 Kaiju to any of the Kaiju in the first Pacific Rim. With the slight exception of maybe Leatherback, only just because Leatherback is awesome. But yeah, I like.
I can understand Mega Kaiju because like Megazord Kaiju sounds kind of cool, but like these other 3, they don't really do much to stand out design wise and all that.
I disagree. Okay, so color wise, maybe they do kind of. Well, I mean, they're supposed to blend together, but they do blend together sort of color-wise, but design-wise, I think they're all very, maybe not unique, but I think at least they're very distinct. Shrikethorn, the one that fires all those spikes, is very dinosaurian to me. Just looks like a hybrid between a sauropod and a tyrannosaur. Hakuja is very like insectoid or arthropod like. It's heavily armored. It's got lots of curvy spikes and blades, and it can burrow underground. And then Raijin is the big juggernaut tank, literally. It has head armor that it can close all around its face, and it can absorb kinetic energy and blow it right back at its opponent. I think it's really cool. And even had these three not morphed together into a giant monster, I think these three kaiju all on their own is enough of a big threat for this movie. But that leads me into my next pro. The giant mega kaiju is fucking cool. This is a way better final boss monster than either of the three kaijus at the end of the first movie.
Yes, I will agree to that, because like I said, Mega Kaiju, like as a concept, I like it. It's cool. I just wish more
cool.
Right.
Go ahead.
Like you said, it's way better than the threat in the last movie. That's the one thing I'll give this movie. Like Mega Kaiju's really fucking cool.
It has a great design. It's very colorful, and it's fucking huge. Like you can feel and see how massive this thing is and how powerful this is. Like this is the ultimate weapon for the precursors, in my opinion. It really does truly feel like the ultimate big bad. It's not in the movie for very long, and it doesn't do very much, but it wrecks the shit of all the Jaegers and is literally so big that it makes the crater of Mount Fuji look small.
It's so pretty big.
Yeah, I think Godzilla in the MonsterVerse would have a hard time taking this thing down.
He'd need to go burning form. But then again, wouldn't that ignite all the kaiju blood in?
That's a good question.
Well, actually, no. Wouldn't it just incinerate the thing? Yeah, that's a good point. Like, if these get hit with like Gypsy Danger Blast, why don't their like kaiju blood just incinerate?
Well, I think because none of the energy blasts from the Jaegers are made of any earth materials like minerals. That they're just energy weapons.
Okay. Well, you know what? MonsterVerse Godzilla, like if he goes full burning Godzilla, I think would take this thing out though, because he would just like his little Mothra wave. But then again, Godzilla drilled a hole to the center of the fucking earth.
Alrighty. My next pro.
I'm just rooting for Godzilla. You know what? We're switching hats now. Hail to the king.
Crap.
Long live.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, pro number 7. This is again very minor. This movie's very colorful. And one thing that I like about this movie, as a nice contrast to the first film, all of the action in this movie
is the daytime,
during the day. And I think it's done very well. It's very appealing and pleasing to look at. But going into the 10-year time jump and the budget of this movie, even though it's not as big, it still looks really nice. It looks big budget. It looks like a lot of people spent a lot of time and effort to make this movie look clean and polished. Well, this goes into the effects, but there's a lot of course, keeping in theme with the last movie, there's a lot of neon lights, lots of blues, lots of greens, lots of yellows. But the main one, of course, there's a lot of neon blue in this movie, like my light right here, right next to my shoulder. It's very visually pleasing and fun to look at, just like the first movie. So going into pro number 8, the special effects in this movie, I'd say about the same as the first one. 95% of the time are top notch. I think there is a lot more CGI than there was in the first movie, but that's fine because it all looks really good. All the kaiju look great. All the Jaegers look great, very well detailed, very animated, very distinctive and colorful and flashy. Um, a lot of the sets look great. The new Jaeger suits I prefer over the first movie. The blue and green suits, I think they look great. They don't look quite as clunky or stiff as the first movie's Jaeger suits did. Again, going into that 10-year time jump.
Right. But but in some ways, I kind of like the older suits because it felt like there was more weight behind everything.
Sure, yeah. Which that's good in and of itself too. Still, I just prefer the look in this movie. Not as much to say about the effects other than they're great, top notch. 150 to 176 million was spent well. Yeah,
It's weird because like some movies with like $300 million budgets you see nowadays, they look like total shit compared to some of the
yeah. I still have not seen the Flash movies, but
or
I
Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny. Like that movie did not look good for 300 million.
haven't seen that one either. I don't plan to.
Or most superhero movies nowadays. You know what movie looks great with a much lower budget? The Creator. The movie's like $70 million. It looks better than like any $300 million movie I've seen this year. The last movie with like a mega budget, I feel like that like looked it. I mean, I wasn't a huge fan of the movie, but like Avatar: The Way of Water, because James Cameron, he's gonna make everything look top notch. I always give him props for that.
Pro number 9 is the Kaiju Jaeger drone hybrid idea. I do have a problem with this. But the idea in and of itself, I think, is really cool. Well, drone Jaegers in and of themselves, I also think is a cool idea because it does make sense because you can only, have so many people who are drift compatible and so many full-size Jaegers to fight kaiju. But it's a good idea to have the drones as like either grunt workers or just like backup Jaegers. Maybe not to fully finish off a kaiju, but at least strong enough until the human powered Jaegers come in order to finish off kaiju. But to have them be essentially kaiju cyborgs, I think is really cool. They all have really cool designs. They all flash a lot of neon blue. They all look the same, sure, but it is a cool design that's copied and pasted multiple times. And they also, too, do make for a very intimidating threat. They're not in the movie very much, more on that later, but still, I think they're really cool. And the last pro that I have for this movie, again, I do have a problem with this, but there are some pretty entertaining action scenes. The two best of the whole movie is, of course, the second time Gypsy Avenger fights Obsidian Fury. And, of course, the Jaeger versus Kaiju fight in Tokyo. Real quick, one last little half pro. There's not nearly as many references to Kaiju past as the first film. But having the final fight take place in Tokyo, Japan, is got to be a wink to the fans. And also, when they're investigating Siberia, Russia, trying to find that Jaeger plant, there's a whole bunch of little symbols of previous Toho and American monsters. Like there's Gigan, Varan, Clover, Zigra, Jiger, Gamera. So that's cool. But the action scenes are all pretty damn entertaining for the most part. There's a lot. Okay, so the fights, they don't feel quite as heavy as the last movie, but the combat is a lot more flamboyant and dynamic, so it's more visually appealing. Like we have giant robots doing jumping roundhouse kicks and firing giant wrecking balls and firing off machine guns and missiles, whips, blades, energy cannons. It's really cool. It feels like full on Mazinger Z versus Godzilla stuff going on here. It's badass, and I like it a lot. So yeah, that's all my pros. I have 3 mixed elements. Do you have any, or do you just have cons?
I have like 7 cons written down here.
Okay, I'll go through my mixed elements real quick.
And I think I may have a mixed element too. The score.
That's one of mine too. Yeah, the music, it's not bad, but it's not as memorable as the first movie.
You know, and they have Lauren Balfa. Like, I mean, he's done good stuff before. I mean, he did the music for Black Adam, which was a pretty memorable theme. But like, why didn't they bring back the same composer? That score was so good in the first movie. You hear the Pacific Rim theme, it's like, it feels like kind of forced in a way. It's like, hey, we got to have the Pacific Rim theme in here because
he
first
also
movie.
did the music for Terminator Genesis, which that's also kind of my least favorite score of the Terminator films. So
yeah, his Black Adam theme's good though.
Yes, but also kind of underused. But continue.
But yeah, like I said, the music just it doesn't have the same. It doesn't pack the same punch as the first film.
Nah.
They have. I mean, the other music they play is like the Trololo songs, like.
That was funny, but kind of stupid.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I don't know. Maybe it's just because I didn't care for. I don't remember like some of the other like pilots have no impact. Like I don't remember who any of them are.
That's my other mixed element. I don't think any of the acting is bad, but outside of Jake Pentecost and maybe Scott Eastwood to an extent, the cast is very bland.
Yes, that's one of my cons. Like that, and that's that.
I will agree.
And there's way too many characters.
Yeah, there's too many characters, and they're all spread too thin.
You know what it feels like? You remember like you've seen the Expendables movies, right? At least some of them.
Nope.
You've never watched any Expendable movie?
No,
Not even the second one?
Throws off everybody who I talk to. I'm such
so
a big action movie guy.
You're an Arnold fanatic. Expendables 2 is the one you want to watch,
right?
though, if you have to watch any of them.
I've never seen them. Never seen a single one.
Just no interest in it? Seeing all them together? Or
no, just hasn't really been on my radar.
No. I think you'd really like Expendables 2. First one's all right. Second one's pretty great. I mean, Van Damme makes a fantastic villain. You get more of Arnold's one-liners, you know, Wilson, like that's one, like I said, that's a lot of fun. And the Stallone versus Van Damme fight's pretty cool. But I didn't watch the fourth one. I'm probably not going to anytime soon. But it's like going from the Expendables 2 to 3, and then it's like they got to bring in all these new casts. We just want to see the old timers instead of like all these forgettable new people. That's kind of like the effect you have with this one, where it's just you have so many new characters like in this movie. I don't remember a single thing about them. They don't really like do anything to stand out or anything unique. It's not like I hate the acting or anything, but nobody really stands out like amongst like different cast members. I mean, some movies can do this, like the first Top Gun, like may not be the greatest movie of all time. I enjoyed, have a soft spot, but those like pilots stood out, like Iceman, Goose, and Maverick and all that. They had like distinct personalities that like you really could like,
and competent actors.
Right. That's the thing too. Like this one, I mean, the actors don't like bring enough charisma outside of Boyega, really.
They're all just angst-ridden teenagers.
Right. It just doesn't really. It didn't really work for me. There's just too many of them. Like, yeah, even the first movie, like you had like Cherno Alpha and Crimson Typhoon or whatever. They didn't have like any scenes to really do anything. But like Cherno Alpha, even with like without really saying much, I felt like I got like their personality just in their designs or something. Like they stood out like based on the designs, not so much like on-screen performance or anything like that. Like they're so like you know, kind of like wacky. They look like they were straight pulled from like a video game or something. But like I said, those designs stood out. Like the rest of the cast in this one, I can't remember a single person's name. And I just watched the movie last night.
I remember Victoria, the angry Russian teenager, only because she goes by Vic for short, and she's an angry Russian teenager who provides fake tension just for the sake of such.
Yeah, I don't remember like much. I forgot her name already.
She played the crazy assassin chick in The Spy Who Dumped Me, who gets impaled on bull antlers.
I have not seen that movie.
It's kind of funny. It's like dumb funny.
Okay, well there you go. That's like I said, it's a con right there. Another con. You know what? I'm just gonna get
hold on. I have one last mixed element, then we'll jump into our cons. That is, I do think there are some crappy green screen shots. Like whenever they're at the Shattered Dome, when all the Jaegers are being rebuilt, and everyone's standing there just flapping their gums. There are a lot of pretty obvious green screen shots throughout this movie.
Mhm.
And that's not helped by the fact that most of this movie takes place during the cold light of day.
Yes, it makes the effects a little bit more noticeable is the daytime stuff.
Thankfully, they don't show them very much, but whenever there is a green screen shot where people are just standing around and talking, they're very noticeable. Not bad by any means, but just very noticeable. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 cons.
I'm sure I'll have some of the same ones. Like some of my stuff I just kind of mold together, but you know what? I'm just gonna get one right out of the way. Killing off Mako Mori.
Yeah. Why?
37 minutes into the fucking movie.
You know
we
what
get
it
rid of the
is?
lead character from the previous film. And it's not like she agreed to come back. She was like, Raleigh didn't. There's nothing like, why? What is the
I
point?
have 2 theories. One is just to get an emotional response
And it
out of the
just makes
audience.
anger. It doesn't really like, you don't feel sad. You just get pissed off. Like
Yeah.
it's like when they killed Dewey off in Scream 5. I'm like,
Or Cyclops
in
half an
X-Men
hour
3.
into X-Men 3.
Yeah, it's that sort of
Stupid.
horseshit. It doesn't work. Because we never really got much of the bond between her and Jake. It felt forced. It just felt tasteless. It felt cynical. It's like as if saying like, "Oh, you really liked this person in the last movie. They were there till the very end. Fuck off. They're dead. They don't really get to do much at all." I hate that. I fucking hate it.
My other theory is it was a budget thing because Universal.
Budget thing. She's not like a major A-list actress. Like she was like you could have. I mean, I'm certain she didn't like have as much of a fee as like Scott Eastwood did, or something. You could have cut out like 100 other like different people and just kind of kept her. This is like $180 million budget movie almost. They could have afforded her just fine. They had Charlie Day in a lot of the movie. They don't have like the Ron Perlmans.
So maybe that is me being just a little bit cynical because this was at the height of Universal's dark ages, in my opinion. So it probably just more had to do with getting an emotional response out of the actors.
It did not work.
Out of the audience. But the only response is anger and disappointment.
Yeah, it is. You know what it is? It's like it also makes me think of like Halloween 5 when they kill Rachel off within like the first 15, 20 minutes of the movie, despite having that strong. It's dumb. You have that strong sibling bond, but instead we're replaced with like people we just don't care about. John Boyega, like I said, his acting is good in the movie. And I wouldn't have minded if Mako kind of came in at the end and you had these two siblings who've kind of like had a bit of a distant relationship there. Like, why, you would have been better. Cut out the little girl or the young girl or whatever, because and just replace that with Mako instead. Because there's already so much going on in the film as is. Like, you don't really need all these other different people. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that could have been a little bit stronger. Or cut out some of the other, like, 800 side characters you have in this movie. Like, you have Charlie Day and you have the stuff with him. And, like, I don't remember any of that stuff. Like, it's just, there's so much going on in this movie. The other movie, the previous film had a lot more focus. And, yeah, there's a good amount of, like, actors within the film, but they're like, Del Toro knew how to utilize them and like how much to kind of like keep in, how much to keep out with it. There's enough focus in there to like when we build up to the cool action stuff, but it was easier to follow. Here, I'm just like kind of lost in the shuffle with so many things going on. It's not like I've watched this movie like hundreds of times. Like it's the first time I watched it in a few years, and like there's so much I kind of forgot about it. But then it just still doesn't leave much of an impact because I just don't care as much. And killing off Mako within like 30 at the 37-minute mark of this film, I just like, that's it. That's the moment that signified that we were in trouble, or right here within the movie. Because like I said, I was still like, it's still, we got a little bit of a fight here. Oh, you just killed off the main character, arguably one of the two main leads of the previous film. 37 minutes in this movie, you still got like an hour and a half left, basically. What are you doing? Like, why? What good does this do? Now, I don't mind sometimes killing off main characters from previous if there's merit to it, right? But here you just don't get like
there is no merit. There is no merit for the sake of such.
Right. I mean, it can work. It just needs to be handled with grace. And I feel like this is just a trend I've seen in movies a lot in recent years. Within the last like 5 to 10 years or so, killing off characters with like no merit whatsoever. Mako was one prime example.
More often than not, it's due because the studio doesn't want to pay actors more than they absolutely have to. It may not have been the case for Mako here.
They had 4 writers on this thing. They could have just written her out of the movie if you're going to treat her that terribly.
Sure, yeah.
Because she's not like it doesn't work for me. And she was the lead in the previous. You think they'd want her more of the marketing because she was well liked in the previous. Unbelievable, just absolutely unbelievable. Baffling decision making.
I agree with a lot of what Sean says. Yes, killing off Mako, it doesn't feel necessary. It feels like it was just done to have an emotional response from the audience. But the only response was anger and disappointment. And I think it's really dumb and stupid. If it was a budgetary thing, you may as well just not had her.
You got Raleigh out of the movie.
Could have just cut out a lot of the other side characters, then just had Mako be the side character for Jake. But I'm not really as angered by Mako's death as, not by much, but as Sean is. I think it's just more confusing for me. Like, why was she killed off? This feels
right. It felt empty.
Stupid.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, granted, Mako wasn't my favorite character within the previous film
either, but
I still feel like she was really important to like why that movie worked so well, and just having her I felt like empty. Like it was like one of those deaths that just doesn't sit right with me. And I'm not against killing characters off, but it has to be done like well. I mean, this is an example of it. The last time I did get severely angry at a death in a movie was like Scream 5. Like I was so mad that they killed the movie for me. It legitimately like the rest of the movie, because it's like if you're gonna kill him off, at least like kill him off in like the third act or like the very end of the movie or something, like like they sacrifice to save themselves for someone, right? Like at least I would have some like emotional like resonance or weight to it. But oh man, killing Dewey off, like I still hate like Scream 5. That's one of the reasons I'm glad that creative team is gone and booted off like Scream 7. They got the Happy Death Day guy coming in because like I liked his slasher movies more.
Awesome, yeah.
Right.
Let's move on. Yeah, Mako being killed off,
or Luke Skywalker dying in The Last Jedi after they humiliated him.
That's probably the worst example. But anyway, yeah, Mako being killed off is pointless and forced, stupid and bullshit. Why was it done? Probably will never get an answer, but let's move on. For me, con number 2, this movie is way too short. It's not that much shorter than the first film. The first movie is, or at least I don't think it is. Pacific Rim Uprising is 1 hour and 50 minutes long. Pacific Rim is, it's 2 hours and 12 minutes. Okay, so not counting credits, Pacific Rim Uprising is at least 25 minutes shorter than the first movie. Why? And that kind of goes into this isn't a con for me, but I can see it as a con, like from a filmmaking standpoint. The script is, to kind of take a page from Trevor Boy's book, the script feels very messy. It feels very bloated and
that's one of my cons too. It's messy. There's too much going on. I think I kind of brought this up at the start when we were talking about the story, but that was another one of my cons, Nick, about the story is kind of messy, like you were saying. It's not as simple and easy to follow as what was in the first film. And I think the sense of urgency that we had in the previous film, like you felt the stakes right away. You felt they were like down to their last things. This one, you don't get that sense of urgency because like nothing much really kind of happens until like I said, until the incident with Mako. It feels like, why are we like doing all these pilots and what's with all the drones and that? Like, aren't they like kind of cleared this stuff beforehand? It just too messy, too much going on. Some neat ideas for sure, but I don't know. I think you brought up like a good point is like how they like kind of like had most of their ideas done really well in the first film, that they didn't leave as much for the sequel worth exploring. And then what we have here, like a lot of it felt kind of forced. So
I think this movie is easily like at least 40 minutes too short, in my opinion.
I did not. It felt really long for me, maybe because I was really bored for a lot of it. But
Well, see, the thing is, I like a lot of this movie's ideas, but it kind of has Godzilla versus Kong syndrome. There's so much shit thrown in here. It kind of feels like they're just going, okay, here's a cool idea, then move on to the next thing. Here's a cool idea, move on to the next thing.
but
Here's
Godzilla
another
vs
cool
Kong, like
idea.
the edit that we saw was pretty streamlined and a lot easier to follow than like what was going on in this one. Plus, like I said, I felt like the characters were better in that movie too. I mean, Kong was the lead character in that film, and there's some cool things with him in that. I don't know. Like I said, I rewatched that movie last night on top of I just had a monster movie marathon. I watched this, watched King of the Monsters and Godzilla vs Kong back to
All right,
back.
moving on. So, yeah, I do think this movie's too short. I don't know if there was a lot of footage cut out of this movie. I wouldn't be surprised.
And the first Pacific Rim had a lot of cut up, but
yeah, for how much this movie is trying to do, it's way too short. It feels very truncated and over bloated, unfortunately, which is not a good mix. Con number 3, there's a lot of underused elements in this movie. Again, going back into that Godzilla versus Kong syndrome, there's a lot of really cool concepts that are introduced, but not much is done with them, like the Kaiju drone, or the Jaeger drone, excuse me. That's a cool concept, but we don't even get to see them in action before they become the Kaiju Jaeger hybrids. And that idea in and of itself, the Kaiju Jaeger hybrids, like that's a cool concept for a movie in and of itself. But it's only in one scene. They're activated, they open up all these breaches, and then they're destroyed and killed. That's it. It feels very rushed. A bunch of all these Jaegers being powered by Kaiju blood is a cool concept, but it's only used for rockets to get them to and from one place to the other. Feels very rushed. The Mega Kaiju, it's cool, but it's only on screen for the last 10 minutes. This big giant team dynamic that all the characters are going for at the very end, it's cool, but it feels very rushed. This will just go into my con number 4. This movie overall does feel very rushed. / the pacing, I think, is too quick. It's just on autopilot fast forward for most of the movie's runtime. In that way, it's kind of like Spider-Man 3, where there's never really any moment for the movie to just like sit back and take a breather like the first movie did. Granted, yeah, there was a lot of time between action scenes in the first movie, but you got character development, world building, and exposition going on between in the downtime for the first movie, so it's warranted for it slowing down. But this movie is just like go, 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 go the whole time. And it never stops to take a moment to breathe. Seanie Boy may think it took an eternity for him to get through it, but I kind of felt like
I was there. That was one of my cons, man. This movie just drags.
I disagree because I like a lot of the things that this movie is doing, but
I was
because
so bored.
it's just constantly going, it feels like a 45-minute watch.
I wish it felt faster.
And a lot of my cons do kind of have to do with that, unfortunately, because my next con, the action scenes are cool,
but they lack weight.
I disagree because the dynamic fighting styles make up for the lack of weight, but I think they're too brief.
Oh yes, that is true. And plus, like, the only action is really kind of safe for the end of the movie. It suffers from like Power Rangers 2017 syndrome, where there's so much setup and talking that nothing really happens until like the final act. And I'm sorry, you got to give me something earlier on.
True, and both fights between Gypsy Avenger and Obsidian Fury, I think, make up for that. I do think it's just a tiny bit disappointing that. Oh, and the attack of the Kaiju Jaeger hybrids is cool too. So that's entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
But to have the Kaiju versus Jaeger combat save for the last 20 minutes is a little bit disappointing. But yeah, the Jaeger versus Jaeger fights is cool, but it's all so brief. The first fight, this is a huge problem that I have with this movie. The Jaegers, they get killed too easily, and the fights generally are very one-sided. Like Gypsy Avenger versus Obsidian Fury, the first fight, Gypsy gets maybe 1 or 2 punches in towards Obsidian Fury. The rest of the time, Obsidian Fury is kicking the shit out of Gypsy Avenger, and it's really frustrating. The second fight is a lot more evenly matched, but it is still, no, I'd say it's pretty evenly matched. But the final fight, especially with all the Jaegers versus the Mega Kaiju, they just get their asses kicked. It's worse than the first movie, in my opinion. Because, there's a couple decent kills. Actually, no. Yeah. None of the Kaiju are killed by any of these Jaegers. They get hurt.
Right, because they fuse together.
They get knocked around, but I mean, yeah, sure, they fuse together, but like if they were to just kill off one of the Kaijus and then they all fuse together, what's to say they can't just use dead tissue and to morph themselves into another monster? Yeah, the fights are very one-sided. They try, but especially against the Mega Kaiju, they get one hit and then they're torn apart. Like Saber Athena slashes at the Mega Kaiju's shoulder, but then gets literally swiped clean in half with one of its tails. That's it. Wrecking Ball dude, he punches it in the face and breaks off one of its jaws, but then grabs onto it and pulls it apart. And Gypsy Avenger, cuts at its shoulder yet again, but then gets both of its blades broken off, and the plasma cannon doesn't do jack shit towards the Mega Kaiju. Yeah, the fights are very one-sided, and they're too brief and too fast, in my opinion. Fast as in they're over in the snap of a finger. So they're cool, but very one-sided and quick. Go ahead.
Okay, so what did I say? Killing off Mako. Newt's entire character in this movie, I'd say, is kind of a con, especially. I mean, I kind of brought this up earlier. Charlie Day has brain sex.
That's another mixed element for me. I like that they brought the actor back.
Right. I like Charlie Day, but the brain sex with the guy that takes me out of the movie. I'm sorry, but it takes me out. I'm just like, I remember like someone like when I first saw the movie, like someone was like, "So how was the movie, Sean?" I'm like, Charlie Day has brain sex with the kaiju, and they just looked at me like, "What?" Like that happens in this movie. I think I saw it with my brother, and we were just like, I looked over at him like, "What the fuck is going on here?" I'm like, "Is this Demolition Man?" But going even weirder. Oh boy, that was one that just like just the sub with that. I mean, I kind of like it was kind of weird because I remember Del Toro saying something about like him possibly becoming a villain like long before this movie came out. So like the twist didn't really surprise me with it because I had heard something about it like even before the movie like came out or I knew any spoilers about it whatsoever. So I kind of saw it coming.
I did not. And that's actually something I do think is a little off-putting because he was really trying hard to save humanity in the first movie. But then to flip around and then just make him the villain, it's kind of like tonal whiplash, in my opinion.
Yeah, it feels kind of off. Like, I don't know. Like I said, there's just stuff that just feels off with this movie, especially like him surrounding his character. Because there's moments where it seems like he kind of cares and like you see kind of the old him in there, but there was really like there's no real resolution to it. Like by the end of the film, because of the stupid cliffhanger ending.
Yeah, I'll get to that in just a minute. You can probably see where I'm going with it.
Yeah, that's one of my cons as well. But I'll give like another one out of the way. It lacks the soul and heart of the first film. Like that. I mean, there is some like I said, there's clearly some nods and Easter eggs in that there, but
Not
I
as
feel
much
like
as the first one.
right. I feel like the soul and passion is just not there as much as like what we saw with Del Toro. Because I mean, Guillermo del Toro, like that guy is a movie fanatic. He loves monster movies. Look at the guy's house, and all the stuff that he has, the different props and all the things. Like he just lives and breathes this stuff, and you felt that in every single frame of the movie. This one, there's moments where you kind of get that they like the stuff, but then also at the same time, it feels like the studio heads are just have their greasy little paws like all over the movie. It's like, this is hip, this is cool. Here, let's give you this really.
Especially with all the angst-ridden teenagers.
Yes, it just feels like they're trying so hard to be hip. It's the Poochie thing, like from The Simpsons, or like that shitty music video I sent you, that you probably didn't watch because you're just like, I'm not gonna watch this thing. You didn't watch it, did you?
I don't remember getting
I
anything.
sent you through messages. It was like the Let's Drift music video for Pacific Rim 2. It's so cringy. It's so awful. They have like these pilots dancing and then the Jaegers dancing in the background. It's like really wonky CGI. It's bad. Like I'm like, this is what they chose to do for marketing. I'm like, oh no, we're in trouble. Like I feel
Here it is.
like
I never watched that. No, sorry. Well, because you sent me that while I was working.
oh yeah. But anyways, like I said, it just feels like it just that is legitimately like the worst thing that this movie breathed was that music video. If you watched it afterwards, like maybe we'll watch it after the stream, but you'll be like, oh good God, Sean, you were right. This is absolutely horrible. But yeah, like that's that one. I'm trying to think of any other real cons. Like I said, the movie really dragged for me.
I have
Personally.
2 more. Con number 8, because I went through a whole bunch talking about the fight scenes, with them being rushed and being underused, a lot of underused elements. Yeah, con number 8 is the super sequel bait ending. Complete opposite of the first movie, which it wrapped up its storyline, but there's the potential hook for more.
Right.
Here, it's like Terminator Genesis. There's the obvious, like, okay, yeah, there's more that people want to do.
I hate cliffhanger endings. Do not do them unless you know 100% for sure you're going to follow up on it. And you have confirmed, like, if you're doing a 2-part movie, okay, I understand the cliffhanger ending in that regards because you already have part 2 in the bag, right? But, like, for something like this, no.
No.
You wrap up your story and then you do, like,
See,
maybe a little tease to do more. Like, I mean, we'll go in the MonsterVerse examples, right? Because like all 4 of those movies had pretty much complete endings. I mean, there's little teases at the end of like where they could go from there, but the main storyline's wrapped up, right? There's a few little lingering plot threads they can kind of do to continue. I know GVK originally had a post-credit thing, but they deliberately took it out because they didn't want to write themselves into a corner for the next film. They kind of wanted to have it wrap up like, okay, let's take our time. Let's really like there's a lot that we have worth exploring. Let's see where we want to go in the next direction. And I respect that, right? At least it feels more finite. In case if it was the last thing, at least it has like an ending, right? But this thing, it's like we're never going to get a follow up. I mean, we had the Pacific Rim, the Black anime. It's like, oh, so maybe we can continue off like some of the endings of.
But it takes place in between 1 and 2.
Right. The 10 years, and like I said, I liked it. There's some interesting things it does with the lore. And like I said, there's some interesting lore and world building within this movie. But I still feel like we don't really know too much about the precursors. Now, from what I was hearing, one of Del Toro's original ideas, I guess, was the precursors were evolved humans from the future. And those like the precursor alien stuff was just their biosuits or whatever. That's like one.
Wow, that sounds like Independence Day.
Yeah, like God, there's a lot of Independence Day in these movies. I mean, like I said, the ending of this movie is Independence Day Resurgence. It's literally the same thing. It just the cliffhanger is just dumb because I hate it. I'm tired. I don't like cliffhanger endings like you, unless you know 100% for sure you have
How
like a
many
follow up.
times has a movie been made that had a cliffhanger ending and there was never a third film? Increasingly more so in recent years. The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Looking at you.
The only sort of follow up we got was Garfield coming back for No Way Home, but it's still like it's still not answering a lot of those lingering plot threads from his movies. But at least he had a little bit better like of a send off, if that really is his last Spider-Man movie, which I don't think so, based on what I'm hearing.
Yeah, this was not a very satisfying ending. The thing is, too, also like Terminator Genesis, had they left out that scene when Jake is talking to a possessed Newt, it could have worked as another standalone movie. It could have just been 1 and 2. That's it. But that scene with Newt, it feels like, okay, now we got to have a third movie. But 5 years after Pacific Rim 2, still not getting the third movie.
And guess what?
Why?
You're probably never going to get that third movie. You know what? At least give me like an anime continuation or something, right? Like, you know how we had like Godzilla 98 and then they had that cliffhanger in it, but it was followed up within the animated series. At least something like that, I think, would be beneficial. Like another season of like Pacific Rim anime stuff. But I like Pacific Rim Black, but it's like at the same time, it's like, you know, you had this ending, but you never really followed up on it in this way. But hey,
that's why I'm not really that excited to check out the Black, because it's not a continuation. It's just an expansion. Whoop-de-doo.
Right, but it's a more interesting story and better characters. And
my final con, this isn't really like a con again. Well, no. I think it's kind of a culmination of all this movie's problems. Because it's too short, because the action scenes are too brief, the Jaegers are too easily killed off, and the fights are very one-sided, and overall, it feels very rushed. This was not enough material for the 5-year wait.
Honestly, they threw too much in, I think.
Like, because you said to me last night, you know, Godzilla King of the Monsters came out 5 years after 2014, and that was well worth the 5-year wait.
Right.
We at least had Kong Skull Island to hold us over in the interim. But with this, there's nothing. There was nothing for 5 years.
Right. In 5 years, this is the best you can do.
This is the best you can do, waiting 5 years. A movie that's like 25 minutes shorter than its predecessor.
And it feels 40 minutes longer.
And it kills off one of its major characters and doesn't even remotely mention the other one. Really? This is the best you can do, guys? Come on now. Any other cons?
I mean, let's see if I wrote any more down. Okay, too many characters. The sense of urgency of the story doesn't feel there. It's kind of messy. Killing off Mako. Charlie Day's weird brain sex. Mentioned that. Movie really drags. Lacks soul passion. Cliffhanger ending. Really stupid. Score feels empty, like absentee outside the half-assed version of the Pacific Rim theme. Too many characters. Yeah, I said that. Doesn't feel very well fleshed. Yeah, I mean, I've pretty much covered everything. I mean, sometimes I don't need like 100 different things. Like things just kind of morph into like major flubs with the other ones.
Final
it had
thought?
some meat. So Pacific Uprising, it's one of the biggest. It's one of the big disappointments. Like, I mean, I tried to like love it when it came out. Like, I felt like, you ever get that where you see a movie and you want to love it so badly because you're so passionate about like something else?
Yeah, Godzilla vs. Kong.
So I feel like you used to like it, but now you're just kind of hating it more that you know that a lot of the movie was changed in the edit bay.
No, I've felt that way since day one.
Okay. But there's still elements that you like though, right? Or do you just
of course.
Do you hate the movie or like strongly dislike it or
No, I like Godzilla vs. Kong. There's just
too many things
missing that it feels like a shell of what it could be. But that we're talking about Pacific Rim here.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to like get your thoughts on that really quickly. But yeah, like I said, there's potential there, but I think maybe if Del Toro came back or a different filmmaker, like who had a lot of love and passion for the anime, like the mechas and the kaiju genres and all that, and really crafted a worthwhile storyline, because this one does not feel it like this. It's messy, it's convoluted, there's too many characters, and it's just killing off Mako, and it just does a lot of things wrong. There's a reason I don't really go back to revisit this one that often, and I was reminded of that when I saw it. It just feels, like I said, it's the Poochie of the Pacific Rim series. It's Poochie the dog. It tries so hard to be kind of hip and cool at times, and just kind of flubs it. It just feels, I don't feel the passion in this one like I did in the previous film.
I don't feel like as much of the weight as I did in the previous film. I just like the obvious sequel baiting. Like I said, like the first film wasn't that. It felt like a pure, like complete movie. Yeah, there's things they could have done with follow-ups and that, but like I said, it felt like a complete movie. It felt triumphant. It felt exciting. Like the sense of unity was there. The memorable characters were there. It just this one, no, I don't get that. There's an emptiness to it, and I it just makes me sad, Nick. It makes me a sad person because I wanted to love this movie so badly. And even again, like several years outside the hype, thinking maybe I'll give this thing a chance and maybe I'll like it more. It's just not going to happen. It's like me with the Godzilla anime trilogy. I tried numerous times to like it and give it a chance, but there's just some things not meant for me. And that's Pacific Rim Uprising.
I think that's
Now,
a very drastic comparison, but okay.
well, I'm just giving you like an example. I wanted to like this movie, Nick. I really, really did. Do you think I wanted to wait 5 years for a Pacific Rim sequel to not like it? No, it's just the way it is, unfortunately. Like I don't really like it all that much. I still have it because like I like giant monsters. Yeah, there's a few cool like action scenes, but they don't really like they're not as memorable as like the stuff in the first film. Like I remember when Gypsy Danger picked up that ship and swung it like a baseball bat. I remember flying from the sky. I remember like the sword, the laser, like the plasma cannon and all that. I remember those moments. But this one, like a lot of it just kind of like comes and goes. So it just
Alrighty, so Pacific Rim Uprising. Is this the sequel that we waited 5 years to see? No.
fuck no.
No. No.
I don't fucking know.
Was this worth 5 years seeing? No. That being said, I like Pacific Rim Uprising. I think it's a good sequel. There's a lot to like about it. There's a lot of effort that went into this movie. I do think that this film is woefully overhated. It has flaws, unfortunately. And yeah, unfortunately, this will remain the disappointing conclusion to the Pacific Rim franchise, not counting the Black. I'm talking about just chronologically in the series. But I think Uprising is a good movie, which is why I will be giving it the same score as the first film. I'll be giving this an 8 out of 10. I like Pacific Rim Uprising. I very strongly defend it. Fuck all you haters. Not you, Sean, but everybody else who says this is one of the worst movies ever made.
I don't think it's one of the worst movies ever made. I've seen far, far, far worse. And like I said, we brought it up earlier on. I saw Jeepers Creepers Reborn in theaters at like Fathom event pricing, ticket pricing, which is way more expensive. And I had fucking like insects flying around me in the screening, which made it way worse.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sir.
Oh man, that to me is
What's
like
your rating?
I'm torn between a 4 and a 5. So you know what? I'm going to go to a 4.5 out of 10. Do we do half star ratings or
Yeah,
half?
if you want to.
So I'm going to go 4.5 out of 10. Like, because beforehand, I was like when last time I saw, I was like, it's about a 5.5 or 6 out of 10 or something like that. It's not like the worst. But then, like, rewatching it again last night, I just felt kind of empty watching it. I just felt like I didn't recognize this world that they were making like a follow up to. I just felt so disconnected. Like, you ever like watch a show and then like you kind of fall out of it and then you kind of just look at it a few seasons later and you wonder like this I don't recognize it. That's kind of me with Pacific Rim Uprising. I just don't recognize this as the same world I once knew. It feels like so far different in some ways and it doesn't feel the same. It doesn't have the same flavor. It doesn't feel like a true natural continuation in a way. Maybe because again, it's a different director and new sets of writers and all that, but it doesn't organically feel the same. It just there's an offness to it that it just didn't feel right to me. And again, not the worst thing in the world. There's some cool moments to it, and I do love seeing giant monsters like generally, but I don't know, like I didn't really like have the excitement of seeing the giant monsters and robots fighting like I did beforehand. So maybe it's because like so much of the movies kind of drags and I just not as invested. It just there was something off about it, and I can pinpoint a few reasons, but it's not the same to me. Maybe if there wasn't a Pacific Rim 1, I wouldn't be as harsh about this one. But again, this is a follow-up. It's continuing off a previous film, and it just if the quality dropped off this much, it just doesn't feel right to me. So, but we spoke for an hour and 40 minutes. I have said my piece about Pacific Rim
Alrighty.
Uprising.
Anything to plug?
I think next up you'll probably see some comic book reviews next week. I still have like a big Halloween Ends video. It's just the issue of trying to get like the people involved in filming some bits. So because it's not just me in the video, I won't give everything away for everyone, but that's kind of what's holding it back from being finished. I actually recorded all the voiceover for it already. I just gotta get like the last bits filmed, and once that's there, then I think we'll be okay. But I can really start editing it. So, but there's a lot of like moving pieces that. So that's like the next big written video, and it's a long video. It'll be very long when it's all done. But that's one. Some written stuff. Monarch Legacy of Monsters officially starts airing next week, so I'll be covering that on the channel, and I'll be sure to tell Nick all about how great it is. Well, hopefully,
put that on DVD and I'll watch it. But if it never gets released, then I'll never watch it. But anyway,
Right.
so post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button and hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends. Look forward to more content coming out this month. And as always, go out and if you make a sequel to a much beloved movie,
Don't make it suck.
Don't take 5 years to put it out.
Unless it's good.
And I'll see you guys in the next video.
Peace out, motherfuckers.